This is Province Sports columnist Ed Willis with the weekly look around the NHL, and we're going to start in Columbus, where the disturbing story of Jack Johnson emerged this week. Johnson is set to make $5 million this year. He's made some $18 million over the course of his 9-year career, but back in October he filed bankruptcy paper citing debts of over $10 million and assets of about $50,000. Now, Johnson's problem started when he fired his agent Pat Brisson, one of the most respected agents in the game, and turned his money handling over to his parents, Jack Sr. and Tina. Tina Johnson borrowed somewhere in the vicinity of $15 million in her son's name against his future earnings, and they were high-interest loans against non-conventional lenders, and that resulted in a series of defaults. Jack Johnson's name was on the paper, so he's being sued at least on 3 different cases for as much as $6 million. And that includes the case of a house in Manhattan Beach, California, in Los Angeles, near where Jack used to live. His parents bought the place with his money, but without telling him, and then they added about $800,000 in renovations. Johnson has since surrounded himself with a new group of advisors and has a new lawyer, and he's cut off communications with his parents. And this is what he told Aaron Portzline of the Columbus Dispatch. I say I picked the wrong people who led me down the wrong path. I've got people in place who are going to fix everything. It's something I should have done a long time ago. Portzline wrote the story on the Dispatch website. It's a great read. I urge you to look at it. And this is the opening lead. On the morning of October 7th, 2 days before the Blue Jackets opened the 2014-15 season, Jack Johnson left the Ferrari parked in the garage of his Dublin apartment and drove his BMW to the federal courthouse to file for bankruptcy. And I think that's going to be the last Jack sees of that Ferrari too. Going to move over to Toronto, where it just seems the fun never ends with the Maple Leafs. The latest chapter, and as the Leafs turn, of course, occurred last night when, after a tumultuous week, they beat one of the most impressive wins of the Leafs season. They beat Tampa 5-2. Then the players, instead of doing the customary fan salute at center ice, huddled together, seemed to decide they weren't going to do it this time, then skated off. Now, team captain Dion Phaneuf offered an explanation, saying they were just looking to break the routine up, and I believe him, but then again, I'm extremely gullible. It's really the latest chapter. Like I said, it was a crazy week in Leafland. They lost to Buffalo and then were blitzed 9-2 by Nashville, and that started the mob howling for the heads of head coach Randy Carlyle and GM Dave Nonis. Nonis took the unusual step of appearing before the media on Wednesday, and he was preaching patience, also wondering where all those people were after they'd beaten Boston, which was the game that preceded the two losses. This is really the first big test for Brendan Shanahan's regime, but Shanahan already hired hand-picked assistants for both Nonis and Carlyle, and I don't see him changing things during the course of this year. Now, the off-season is another question. And then, of course, there's one final act to be played in this, and it took our old friend Brian Burke to liven things up. Phil Kessel is such a polarizing figure for the Leafs, and he's made all kinds of news because he only speaks sporadically to the media, and when he does, it's a painful experience for all. But anyways, that became a story this week, and somebody from the National Post got a hold of Burke, and God bless him, Brian delivered. This is what Brian had to say. Why should Phil have to talk to those pukes every day? There's a hailstorm after every loss, and the Toronto media don't care whether they get it right or not. Don't ever change, Brian. The third stop's going to be in Edmonton, and this one's a little more straightforward. The Vultures are starting to circle around the head of head coach Dallas Eakins, who's won 35 games and 100 starts as head coach in Edmonton. Craig McTavish, the GM, is the GM who fired Ralph Kruger to hire Eakins amid much fanfare 2 years ago. But it looks like Eakins is starting to skate on thin ice. In a recent poll of ESPN that ranked the 30 head coaches, he ranked 30th, but at least he got a good line off about it. This is what Eakins had to say. I can only go up, so I guess that's good. Good one, Dallas. And finally, we're going to end up in New York, and this one's going to get a little complicated, so bear with us. NHL VP Bill Daley illuminated the controversial recapture clause. And this is interesting for Canucks fan because it brings back Roberto Luongo, I should say. The clause was jammed into the collective bargaining agreement that ended the 2013 lockout, and Daley makes no bones about it. It was designed to punish the teams that had tried to circumvent the existing deal. He says all those contracts were legal and above board, but they also they violated the spirit of the agreement, and they took pains to send that message with the new deal. Now there are 20 of these contracts. In the case of Luongo, his expires in 2022, but if he retires 2 years before the deal, the Canucks are facing a significant cap hit. It'll be $4 million for each of the 2 years of that deal. Other teams have it a lot worse. The Minnesota Wild, for example, signed Gary Suter and Zach Parise to identical 13-year, $98 million contracts. That averages out to a cap hit of $7.5 million. I can't believe I'm rattling these numbers off, by the way. If they retire with 5 years left, the Wild are facing a cap hit of $4 million a year over 5 years, and that number goes up dramatically for each succeeding year. I wish I could explain the formula, but it's like one of those deals Matt Damon solved in Good Will Hunting. Anyways, Daley was asked about this, and he was completely unapologetic. He said, "We were very upfront with the clubs. We told them we're going to seek provisions in the CBA that will extract a cost for pushing the boundaries in this area, which is clearly inconsistent with the purpose of the original system. So all the clubs are on notice for probably 2 years in advance of bargaining. To suggest that anybody was really surprised would be very unfair." So on that happy note, we'll end this week's tour, and this is Ed Willis from Province Sports signing off.